Hello, we are talking with Peter Leeson. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Nice to see you again in Cluj.
Thank you.
Your presentation from yesterday was amazing. I really enjoy your talk about the butterfly effect and how it can be seen in project management these days. So the first question will be if you can detail to our readers how the butterfly effect applied to the tea history and where we got actually from a simple cup of tea imported from India.
Okay, I'll hold this.
I can.
It's all right. So the butterfly effect is a basic concept that small events lead to other events, lead to something else, and we never know what's going to come out of things. It's a phenomenon that exists in natural evolution, which is called acceptation. I think it is. I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. I think that is it, where, for instance, dinosaurs grew feathers in order to keep warm and then discovered that they could fly. So it's a side effect of something. This wasn't what was meant to happen, but it led to something else. So the traditional story of the butterfly effect is that a butterfly flaps its wings in South America and a typhoon happens in Asia because of related events. And the example that I used in the presentation was that in 1416, if I remember correctly, the East Indies Company was set up to import into England from India some basic foodstuffs. And this included things like silk and opium and spices and a product called tea. And by importing tea into England, the English discovered the principles of boiled water and boiling water. And so when the big plagues hit Europe, because some areas of England were boiling their water, they avoided the plague and started the Industrial Revolution. And one man, whose name I have now forgotten, decided he could use boiling water and steam to get water out of mines so as to help the mining industry. And that led to using boiling water as a mode of transportation and the first steam-powered engines, and then led to traveling by train. And the traveling by train came to a problem because at the time in England, like in most countries, every town had its own time. 12 o'clock was when the sun was at the highest, and so when you traveled east-west, there could be 10, 15, half an hour difference in time. So there was a decision made then to use the Greenwich Observatory as time zero, and the whole country was to take Greenwich Observatory time as the national time. And that then created what is now called Greenwich Mean Time, GMT, which is the basis for all timing in the world, and which is the foundation which is necessary for things like GPS satellites and being able to locate yourself, because no one anymore knows, well, no one below the age of 25 knows how to read a map anymore today, because we've all got GPS on our telephones. So it's small effects that lead to big consequences. And what I was trying to point out was that when you start a transformation program, there is something, and normally in IT I hate the word bug, I prefer defect, but in this case there is a bug in the system, there is a little something you haven't thought of, which is going to impact all your effort, your project, your change management, your vision, and is going to derail it. And that comes from the fact that most companies do not understand how complicated things are and will take what seems to be obvious solutions to correct extremely complex situations, or will take a consultant who comes in with a ready-made solution. I know I have done it for many years. Come in with a ready-made solution and say, just do this and all will be well. So it never works the way they promise.
Thank you. It's a fascinating story, and it's really interesting, and somehow for me open a little bit the eyes about what we should apply to different projects based on their needs. So coming up to this, can you tell us a few words about what is actually the Cynefin, if I pronounce correctly, Cynefin framework?
So the Cynefin framework was created by Dave Snowden mainly, or he's the leader in this. I don't want to say he did the work by himself, but he is the brains behind it in his company, which was called Cognitive Edge. So it's a company in Wales, and basically he's taken the complexity principles and the chaos theories and brought them down to management activities. So basically he divided the management or companies or situations or problems into 5 categories. There is the easy one, the simple, the obvious one, where there is a very clear cause and effect, and if you want to correct this, you know exactly what to do. If I want to make myself a cup of coffee, that's simple, that's obvious, I know exactly what I need to do, and every time I do it, I will have the same outcome. We have then got the complicated situation.
Yes.
The complicated situation where there's slightly looser constraints, so it's a little bit more difficult to establish the links, and that is where you start needing experts who will come in, who will do an in-depth analysis, help you to understand what can be done, and prompt you to action. But you need more analysis than you do in the obvious environment. The third box is the complex one, and the complex one is where you have got very loose constraints. The constraints tend to influence your decisions rather than actually make things happen. And it's difficult, and usually you can identify the cause and effect, but only afterwards. And so you need to do a lot of research, and you need to try solutions. There is no obvious solution to this. So you have to try different things. You've got to run several tests, preferably tests that are controlled, that are fail-safe, so it's all right if it goes wrong, and a few that maybe are contradictory, just so as to make sure you can start to isolate a solution that would work. The fourth one is the chaotic environment, and the chaotic one is where there is no control anymore. This is typically the organization in the software world where everybody is firefighting and running to deliver something and doesn't have time to do the work properly and doesn't have time to document things, so that it's delivered late and it's delivered bad quality, and so we are firefighting and we don't have the staff to do it all, and we don't have enough times, and people are complaining, and just everything has gone wrong, and it's very difficult to identify what happens. And there is a step of first acting immediately in order to clear up the situation as much as possible, and then really start working on identifying long-term solutions. The fifth one, which is the one that's usually forgotten, is the disorder. And the disorder one in the Cynefin model is represented in the middle, and that is basically when you don't know where you are. And that's the dangerous one, because when you don't know where you are, you will choose what is most your favorite option. So process people and bureaucrats will immediately go to the obvious solution. Consultants will immediately go to the complicated solution. And very few organizations will understand that, in fact, they're in highly complex or chaotic environments, and that just throwing a solution at the problem is not going to help. It's just going to add another dimension to the already existing complexity. It's a fascinating diagram. It explains in particular how you should, I'm sorry, not diagram, it's more than a diagram, it's a methodology. It explains in particular how you want to try to evolve as much as possible between complicated and complex. So the complicated area is where you can really exploit your solution. You know what you're doing, you have a methodology in place, you can resolve your problems. And then from time to time you have to go into the complex area, because that is where you are going to discover new things. So this is really the exploration, the discovery of new things. You want to avoid chaos at all costs. And if something is working, and if you're in a fine repetitive solution, you might come down to the obvious, but basically obvious, it's where ideas go to die. That's the end of the road. The obvious solution, I think one example of this is the American automobile market, or the car manufacturing in the United States in the 1960s, 1970s, where they were the biggest and the best, that they didn't have to worry and they didn't have to do so much research and development, just put more chrome on the cars and it'll continue selling. And then the Japanese came off and killed them, and the Europeans came along and killed them, and they had to suddenly wake up. That's the risk there. So it's really trying to get this circulation between complex and complicated, so that you can discover new solutions and really exploit them to their best as complicated solutions.
Thank you very much. If you are thinking to a startup, where do you think they will regularly fit? In the chaotic, or will be complex?
It depends what we're talking about when we say startup. So for me, a good startup company has an idea, a sales, something unique, and a way of building it. So they should be, as far as I'm concerned, very quickly in the complicated area. All right? We know what we're doing. We know how to do it. We're not saying it's easy, because if it was, someone else would have done it. We might dip into complex as new problems arise, as the startups begins to grow, because it's easy for a startup. There are three of us who've shared a university room or a garage, and we've built a product and it's working. And then we start hiring people and growing, and it very quickly gets into the complex area, because now it's not just working every hour of the day, but we've got to get other people motivated. We've got to start working as a team, which we've never done before. We've got to start understanding things, so we fall into the complex area. And I'm afraid then a lot of startups do fall into the chaotic, because the entrepreneur with the original idea is a good entrepreneur, has a good idea, is often a good technician, but doesn't know how to manage a large team. Okay? Managing 10 people is not too difficult. Managing 100 people is a completely different profession. If you're going to grow into a company of 500 people, you have to hire professional directors and executives to run the company. because the entrepreneurs and the technicians are not capable of doing it, except miraculously, but I've never met any of them.
Sounds great. Very, very, very good words you have, and yeah, inspiring. So one last question. We are here at IT Camp. I forgot to mention in the beginning. So we are here at IT Camp 2018. I think Peter is here for
IT Camp.
IT Camp, yeah. For 8th time, or I don't know. I don't
6
know.
times.
6 times. Okay.
6 times. I have done all the IT camps that have been held here. The 2 first ones were held at a different place, and I did not do those 2. They were very technical, and because I am not technical and I don't understand what most people are talking about here, I was the first non-technical person to be invited here. And I have been every year since, and I have just finished now my 11th presentation at IT Camp.
Wow.
So it's slowly adding up. And I keep on telling the same thing, but people keep on coming back to him. We explain the same thing differently.
Yeah, totally agree. You are really inspiring this year, and I remember your presentation from last year was also great. So we hope you are still coming.
I don't remember my presentation from last year. I actually have no idea what I talked about, but it was probably the same subjects.
Yes, but as you say, from a different perspective, and yeah, really lovely. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.